Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Strand. My name is Robin, and I help direct the events here at Strand. For a little bit of history, Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until, after over 92 years, Strand is the sole survivor, run today by Nancy Bass, who is here with us tonight. Strand runs 400 events a year and still houses new and used books. Tonight, I'm excited to have with us Erin Morgenstern. To celebrate the release of The Starless Sea, her latest novel, a sweeping tale of lovelorn prisoners and the sweetly soaked shores of lost seas. Erin is also the author of best-selling novel The Night Circus. Her work has been translated into over 37 languages. Joining her is Chuck Wendig, John W. Campbell Award finalist, co-writer of the Emmy-nominated Collapsus, and best-selling author of Star Wars Aftermath, the Miriam Black thrillers Zeros/Invasive, and his latest Wanderers. We have copies of their titles available at the registers, and they make great gifts. I am thrilled to have Chuck and Erin with us here tonight, so please join me in welcoming them to the Strand.
All right, we're doing it.
We're professionals. This is a nice chair.
This is nice. We might just nap,
It's true.
if that's okay. It's been a long week, and she's been on tour
and
for...
I have a cold.
Yeah, she's a cold, so...
It's
you
okay.
know.
I'll try not to cough. Oh, here.
Yeah.
You have my tea. I'm going to steal
I
it.
have your tea. Yeah, I don't
I'm gonna
want...
take it.
That's, yeah.
Okay.
It's important tea. Well, hi, Erin.
Hi, Chuck.
How are you?
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
This is my favorite bookstore in the world.
This is the greatest.
I
yeah.
know I'm not supposed to pick favorites, but it's my favorite.
Don't tweet that, though, because that...
Yeah. No, you can tweet it. Like, it's like I feel like the Strand is in a class by itself.
Yeah.
As far as bookstores go.
I had never been here.
I was just going to say this is Chuck's first Strand visit.
Yeah, I kind of didn't want to do the event. I'm like, can I just wander for a while?
Yep.
But
Maybe like where'd Chuck go? He's like,
I
oh, he's
know.
shopping.
But you want the event, so we got to do the event.
Yeah.
Let's start off by asking what I feel is probably the most important and incisive question regarding this entire night, is what went wrong with Game of Thrones Season 8?
So many things.
So many things. This is what we're talking about all night. I don't know if you knew
No.
that.
I have been trying to do Erin Morgenstern and Chuck Wendig drink gin and complain about Game of Thrones as an
Yeah.
event for a very long time.
We pitched it at Comic-Con for
no,
real.
I don't know why they didn't pick
They
it up.
did not bite on it, and I was very
We
disappointed.
would have gotten a crowd.
Yeah. So Starless Sea, congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge book. Not just a huge book, but regardless of its success, amazing book. A book that, for me, served, I like to call it narrative ASMR. And I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on plot stuff, so no one's going to be spoiled here. But
Yeah, no spoilers.
I feel like it's this book that arrives at the perfect time. You know, there's a thing about some books, we sort of have a thriller book type of culture where you read these novels and they are stressful to read. And that's part of how it gets you, right? It embeds sort of a stress hook in your cheek and drags you into the narrative. But this is not that. It still pulls you along with mystery and heart. And there's a few dark, strange moments and a lot of magic. But at the same time, I never found it stressful. And it was so wonderful. And it was like counter-programming to like everything going on. So what was it like to write this? Where does it come from? Where does this book come from for you?
I think I needed that non-stressful thing. I think in sort of a very, very non-obvious way, story-wise, it is sort of a reaction to the time it was written in. I had a weird time over the last several years because the Night Circus was kind of bigger than I thought it might be. And anything that anyone ever told me doesn't happen to debut authors happened to me. So that was the thing. And then immediately people said, when's your next book coming out? And I said, that one took me like 5 years to write. So it might take a minute. Yeah. So I was sitting in that pressure of the sophomore novel after the big first book. And then the world got weird.
Yeah.
And so I was already writing what eventually turned into the Starless Sea, but I was kind of struggling with it and trying to figure out what I wanted to do and why I was writing a book in the first place. And I started asking myself these big meta questions of why am I writing a novel? Why does anyone write a novel? Why do we tell stories?
Right.
And started thinking about those sort of things. And then I used to live in New York, and in the summer of 2016, I moved to the Berkshires, and I did not have cable or internet for 2 years.
Oh, that sounds like a dream. Like both stressful and unstressful at the same time.
I believe it's why the book is done.
Yeah.
But it was also a very strange time to not have cable or internet. And
yeah.
And it made everything seem a little more surreal and a little more disconnected because I was just sitting in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. You were in a bunker without a radio.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so I just dug in, and I lived in the space of this book for several years. And I think that sort of idea of finding a fictional place to get away from things.
Yeah. Talking about the space of the book is fascinating because the book is very much about its spaces. It's sort of interstitial spaces, it's architectural spaces, and it has a really great command of that. What is it? And it's also not something that is a traditionally linear narrative. It has, how many prologues does it have?
Oh yeah, 4 prologues, technically.
Anybody who's a writer in this room and you're like, you're not supposed to write prologues, be like Starless Sea and then drop it like a mic and walk away.
Yeah, you can also use the Night Circus for everyone's like, don't write in second person.
Don't write in second person. Boom.
And
done.
also, I believe we're a very present tense friendly table here.
So huge fans of present tense. So what is that like in terms of your process? You're not really a linear writer. Is that true?
I write completely out of order.
That is. Are you okay? How do you do that? I've tried. It hurts. I like bleed from the nose. It's not good.
I think it's because what you said, it's like, it's spaces. I always start with space. Like I had the idea of what the Night Circus was as a space, as this like circus that had lots of like different sized tents and paths in between and a bonfire in the middle, even before I knew why there was a bonfire in the middle. And I started from that. And for Starless Sea, it very much started with this space that felt like sort of underground library-esque space. I don't like to use the L word when describing the space in the book. Even though it has library-esque qualities. And it took me a while to figure out why, and it's because it doesn't really have librarians. And I feel like if you're a space like that filled with books and you don't have librarians, you're not really a library. But because I start with space, I write around the space. I'll write like exploratory little like fragments of backstory and side story and like front story and like little background things, and I don't try to find the traditional story arc right away. I write all over and around it. So, and I write in these, it's sort of something I started doing in the Night Circus. I kept doing in this one. I write in sort of short, isolated, like vignette type chapters.
Yeah, and some of those linger that way in the
and
book.
some of them sort of stay like insular and like on their own, and then some of them end up being interconnected. But I think because I do that, I can always just write another one that takes place at a different time or write something else. And it's easier for me to jump around time.
Oh, that's cool.
But then it makes it harder to find where the story is.
Sure.
Because I end up writing way more than I will ever use.
How much more did you write?
I'd say I have at least 4 times the amount of the material that ended up in the book.
Oh, that's cool.
I probably wrote the back half of the book at least 3 or 4 times, almost entirely.
So is that kind of, how do you keep track of it all? I know a lot of authors like Scrivener.
I was going to say Scrivener. Scrivener is the magic word. Okay. Scrivener is a writing program that allows you to take like a big long document and break it into like little folders and subfolders, and then you can like drag and it has like a sidebar so you can see like all the pieces. So I have like each section of the book has its own little mini document within the larger document. There's 6 parts to the book. Each part has a folder. Every plot line was color coded. So gosh. like the Zachary plot had its own color like on the side. So it's easier for me to kind of take that long sprawling thing and visualize it in something like that. If it was just like one never ending Word document, I'd probably lose my mind.
Yeah. So you're almost creating like a narrative symphony. I mean, you're sort of literally orchestrating pieces, moods and tones and story and plot and characters
and it's all
together.
Fragments, and I put it all together.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like I make jigsaw puzzle pieces, and I don't know how many of the pieces I'm going to use to like form the final puzzle.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. You kind of hit on a question earlier about going back to where this comes from. You were saying trying to figure out why people tell stories. So not only why do you tell stories, but why did you tell this story? Like, what is it that, not just as a counter-programming to the times, but what is it about the book that's you? Because I can tell you already, knowing you, there's a lot of you in this book.
Oh, thank you.
In the best way possible, in the way that it's sort of a submerged persona in there, and you see all these little pops of Erin, and cocktails, in video games, and books, in stories. It's a story about stories. So why do you tell stories?
Well, I think it's like a big, heavy question that I think I just asked more questions about. And so the why do I tell stories, I think the book is the long form answer to that. I think the short form answer is I've always liked storytelling. I was a theater kid, and I was always I would paint and I would draw, and I like expressing that. And I think with books, it enables me to do so much with so little. Like, all you need is a pen to tell a story like this, and you can build a world in a sentence. And that's the sort of like thing I like, as far as being able to take something that's in my head and put it down and send it out into the world. And I think for the sort of things that are in it, I just like to write about things that I find interesting and things that I like. And this was also, being my second novel, this was my chance to kind of establish a little more what a Morgensternian novel is.
Okay. Yeah, because you're really like establishing territory in a sense.
Yeah, I get to like expand it, because I first it was just defined by what the Night Circus was like sort of my entire body of work, and now I get to have something else to expand on it. And then there's still going to be like whimsy and cats, but there's other stuff in this one too.
Yeah, there's whimsy and cats. The Erin Morgenstern
It's kind of
story.
my brand.
Yeah.
Add gin in there, and I think we've covered all the bases.
Don't worry, we will get to gin.
Oh, yes.
Don't worry. That's going to be the back.
I'm drinking tea, by the way. This is not gin.
It's just a cup of gin, everybody. Just a cup of gin. So, you have three key pieces of iconography in here, but obviously there's more than that. You've got the bee, sword, key, but also owls and other. Where does this come from? Where are these, again, things that just sort of interest you? Did they come out, were they a surprise?
They were kind of like one of the most planned elements of the book, because when I first started out, I knew from the Night Circus, one of the things that like seems to like draw people in and that people responded to was that it has a very strong visual language.
It really does.
And it has a color scheme. And I think having those sort of aspects in something that's just all prose adds another level to it. So I wanted to do something like that wasn't necessarily a color scheme. So I had the idea of using symbols very early, and I wasn't sure what symbols I wanted to use. I had a running list of like possibilities, and like it always was the sort of like portal fantasy idea of like the Narnia door kind of thing. So I knew I was going to have doors, so keys were kind of a given. Yeah. I liked swords in both a classic fairy tale and a Legend of Zelda sort of way. And then the bees were kind of persistent. The bees just kept showing up.
Yeah, that happens to me too.
And
I cover myself with honey. It's kind of
when I was living in Manhattan, like there was a day I had my windows open and a honeybee flew in my apartment and just like kind of flew around and then flew out another window. And then, do you know a stuffed animal company called Squishables?
I do not.
Yes, Squishables are awesome.
Okay.
You should look them up. They're like big, round, squishy stuffed animals, and they have
we may have one.
Yes.
I think do they have an owl?
Probably.
Yeah.
They have all sorts of animals. And a friend of mine got me. They do mystery Squishables where you can just order like you don't know what you're gonna get.
Oh,
so
I'm in.
A friend sent me a mystery Squishable, and it was a bee. And I sent her a picture, and she was like, "Never in a million years would I have picked the bee for you." Yeah. And it was like little things like that. And the other thing that the bees kind of worked well is I wanted something that felt very old. Yeah. And had a sort of ancient feel to it. So bees and honey, and like because beekeeping goes back so long, and yet it still feels very modern at the same time. One of the core things I wanted to do with this book was write something that felt old and new at the same time.
Yeah, as much as it references things like video games, or at the same time the book component and the again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but there is a timeless aspect to it that this feels like it isn't set anytime, which is again part of the magic of the book. Going back to that video game thing, so I think we need to ask, what is your favorite video game, or what are you playing right now? Both of those questions.
They have the same answer.
Yes.
Because I had a cold, so last week when I was actually home for a few days, I was replaying for the third time Dragon Age Inquisition.
There it is.
Which I love all the Dragon Age games, but I played Inquisition first, so it's sort of like my favorite because of that. I feel weird like pontificating about Dragon Age when I'm literally wearing a Skyrim necklace right It is like, it's that game I go back to. It's the
Yeah.
game that had the biggest influence on the book because it was, I was playing it when it first came out. It was sort of like end of 2014, I
Yeah.
think. And I was playing, and I had the beginnings of the book, but it really was not book shaped. It was in word soup phase. And I had Zachary in my head, and Zachary is a grad student in Vermont when we meet him. And I figured he was probably an English major, even though it felt too on the nose. But I was playing Dragon Age, and I was thinking about the way you can do narrative in a big role-playing video game, which is fascinating to me from a writing standpoint, because it's the sort of game where like the choices you make as a player character affect where the story goes.
Yeah.
And like, so I can play it one way and make certain choices, and you can play and make different choices.
It's a totally different game.
And it changes the game. So which one's the story?
Yeah, that's the great thing. BioWare, the game in a BioWare game is actually not really the A/B attack type stuff. It's about the bricklaying of narrative and what bricks you choose. It's almost like Lego, but narratively speaking. So that totally works. That
When I
makes
think
so
of
much
it like
sense.
narrative Lego now.
Narrative
Thank you
Lego.
for that.
Yeah.
But I had that moment of thinking about it narratively and thinking about this is so much like what I want to do with the book, and it dovetailed so well with the things I was already working with, like fairy tale retellings and different versions of old myths. And then I suddenly had that light bulb moment of, oh, like you can probably get advanced degrees in like game study.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, that's probably what Zachary is
That's
up
what he's
to
doing.
on his snowy campus there. And that kind of brought a whole other layer to the book.
That's cool. Okay. Also, so cocktails and spirits
Yes.
make a play in the book.
Yeah.
What is your favorite spirit?
Ooh.
And what's your favorite cocktail?
You know I'm a gin girl.
I know. Gin. Okay. So what's your favorite gin?
Oh.
Ooh, right?
Oh, it's like picking the favorite bookstore. If I had to choose, like if it's just like
Yeah.
like your desert island gin,
Yeah.
I have to go Bar Hill.
Nice. Yeah, I'd agree with you. By the way, Desert Island Gin sounds either like a band or a problem. Like, it's like, ugh.
Because it's it's a Vermont gin. It's actually finished with raw honey.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a cold. It's finished with raw honey. They also do. Have you tried this? Have you had their vodka?
No.
They have a vodka that's distilled from honey.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's good stuff.
I had their Tomcat recently in
Yes.
an Earl Grey honey syrup cocktail.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds delightful.
So we're all going out after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite gin cocktail?
A favorite gin cocktail? Right now, I am living on Last Words.
Yes. Love a last word.
Yeah, thanks to Lauren Panapinto, one of the art director at Orbit, and Mallory Mira. They kind of sold me on the magic of the Last
Yes.
Word when I was with you.
It's
actually.
a very nicely balanced cocktail.
It's got everything.
It is equal parts gin, green chartreuse,
Yeah.
maraschino liqueur, and lime.
Yeah. And there's so many variations on it. Subbing out one thing into another becomes an entirely different cocktail. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
sometimes I don't know what to call things, and I'm just like, oh, I put more of that in it.
Yeah.
Did I change its name?
What happened?
Like,
Yeah.
if I don't have an absinthe rinse, is it a corpse survivor number 2?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that was a good question. Okay, so did you say what your favorite cocktail?
No, I dodged that.
Yeah, no, we're back. We're
Dang
back.
it.
We're circling back.
I think I have to go with a bee's knees.
Bee's knees. Okay.
Which is it's a Prohibition era cocktail that's just gin and lemon and honey syrup, and it apparently originated because like the bathtub gin was so terrible you needed to hide the taste, so you put
Yeah.
lemon and honey in it.
Yeah, that's delicious.
But now you can kind of do it with like proportions that you can go like stronger on the gin because you
Yeah.
have such nice gins.
When if you do Bar Hill, you can
Yes.
kind of dial back the honey a little bit.
Bar
yeah.
Hill sells like a holiday gift pack of they sell a bottle of the regular gin with the bottle of the Tomcat gin and a jar of their raw honey.
Why am I not buying this right now?
I have like 3 sets in my basement because
Sure.
I bought them when they were on sale last holidays.
That makes sense. Do you have a favorite honey?
Ooh,
Yeah.
we were just talking about this.
We were talking about honey.
I actually do have a favorite honey. For the longest time, I didn't think I liked honey.
Yeah.
Because it turns out I just don't like clover honey, which
Yeah.
is the kind you usually get in like the Squeezy Bear. I really like meadow foam honey,
Yeah.
which we were just talking about because I had B-Raw does a meadow foam. But what's the brand you sent me?
Oh, I
honey?
said Asheville Beach Farmer. Yeah.
And they have a meadow foam.
They do.
And they actually had like tasting notes listed on the bottle, or the jar rather. And one of them for the meadow foam is toasted marshmallow. And I was
Yeah.
like, yes, that's it. That's what it tastes like.
It tastes literally like marshmallow. It's honey that tastes like marshmallow. It's fantastic. Yeah. So
Now I'm hungry.
I know. We've made poor decisions in what we're talking about. Thirsty and hungry.
Dang it.
So let's say you come upon a door. It's a book full of doors that go to other doors. Where would you hope it takes you?
Are there limits to this question?
Well, no. I mean, it can't be.
Well, if we're talking in context of my book, I do think like I write the spaces I want to go to.
Sure.
Like the space within the Starless Sea is like sort of my ideal space. It's full of books and cats, and I think a lot of the space was sort of like based on my like feelings. Like most of your traditional like magic spaces that you find doors to go to like aren't really places I want to go to. You know how everyone still talks about they want their Hogwarts letter?
Oh yeah, you don't want that.
I don't really want to go to Hogwarts. I don't want to have to do homework.
No.
Like,
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's like a school setting. It's just like I like the magic part of it, but not the school setting part of it. I was just like, so what if it's just like a really big like space that like you still have all the books and you have like cozy corners to read them in, and there's a thing in the Starless Sea that's like a dumbwaiter that's called the kitchen that you can just
It's the best thing. It's like ask it for whatever you want and it gets it for you. And
you know what it is. It's the replicator from Star Trek.
It's the replicator. It's the fantasy
like
version of the replicator.
It's one of those things I've like, I always wanted.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The better version is this because it knows things. The replicator only does what you tell it to do.
Oh, this is true.
This goes beyond what you ask of it.
Yeah, thank you. I hadn't thought of that before. Thank you. It's like better than the replicator.
It's better than the replicator. Future needs to get on that. That's why fantasy is really amazing. That's what we're trying to say.
It's true.
Are there any portal fantasies you would want to avoid? Narnia? That sounds creepy. Narnia's a little creepy.
I actually got my like sort of opinion on Narnia in here with the like. It's a little too much allegory.
Yeah, it's a little too on the nose.
And I remember having this conversation. You don't really like. You don't want to go to Westeros and
no,
especially
boy,
not now.
Don't. Yeah. No.
And someone asked me at an event the other day if I could go to like any like fantasy world, like any magical world, what would it be? And I didn't really think about it too hard. And I said Skyrim.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about why I did that. And like, as opposed to Thedas, which is the world that Dragon Age takes place in. Do you know the story behind that name, by the way?
No, I don't.
Okay. So apparently they just had notes that were like, when they planned Dragon Age originally, that were just the Dragon Age setting. So it said the DAS on it, and no one ever came up with another name, so they just called it Thedas. Which I absolutely love from a writing point of view.
That's how just nonsensical writing is. Sometimes just like that works.
Yep. It's there. It sounds good. But I would just get way too involved in like Mage Templar politics.
Yeah.
In Thedas, so I was just like, but in Skyrim, I feel like I would just like wander around and like avoid mud crabs and like keep to myself.
Yeah, and kill people in caves.
Yes, and I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I've walked around that map. I don't have a good sense of like walking around some other places, but I could probably find my way around.
I could find my way around Skyrim. I played that too many times.
Yeah.
I really have a problem.
It's one of those things that I go back to like a comfort game. Like it just feels like familiar.
Yeah.
And like I'm playing it on my Nintendo Switch now, and I haven't played it on the Switch that much. So the controls are like destroying me. I'm just like, I can't even like shoot a skeever that's like right there. It's very sad.
I haven't even thought about that. The controls would be on this one.
I had to turn off the thing that like moves the screen like while you tilt it. I had to, because I was just like, I was just spinning around in circles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like drunk Skyrim.
It is, though.
It's like drinking Skyrim without the drinking. Ugh. What fun is that? So you have a way with language, and we both have a friend in common, Paul Kruger, who wrote a fantastic novel,
Steel Crow Saga. It's such a good book. Highly recommended. It's beautiful, too. Beautiful. It would make a very good gift.
Yeah, beautiful. It's a single-serving epic fantasy, not like a 10-book cycle, so you can be
standalone. We love the word standalone.
So, I always was fascinated by the choice of his language in that book. Like he uses the word or the phrase "sauced with blood" at one point, which, outside of being purely visceral, Paul really loves cooking. The book features cooking sometimes, and it's sort of an interesting thing. And I remember reading your in Starless Sea. There was something about the bullet came to rest in the wall, and it was such a fantastic way to describe, because you would usually be like, well, bullets flying, and it's like you use some like kind of aggressive sort of aggro language about it, but it was like such a Starless Sea way of describing the motion of a bullet landing in a wall. It came to rest in a wall. How much, this is a strange question, but how much do you think about that when you're writing, or is that just a thing that unconsciously happens and you're happy when it does?
I think I don't think about it too much. Like that's one that I'm sure I just wrote it and didn't really think about it. And I was thinking probably sometimes I think in terms of like not so much what the action is, but how it's affecting what's going on.
Right.
Like it's like, so my attention was probably more on the wall
Sure.
than the bullet at that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I do like, I like a sort of adding a little personality to inanimate objects
Yes.
kind of thing too. But I don't try to overthink it. Sometimes I'm not a language person. I'm a visual
Sure.
person. And a lot of the writing process for me is taking these visual, like these images and these moments and trying to translate them into words. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes phrases like that will just come easily. And then sometimes it'll take me a while to really kind of dig into what I'm actually trying to say and how to take the picture and turn it into words. I use thesaurus.com a lot.
Yeah, that's another thing. People tell you
it's
you're not supposed to
really
look at
useful.
thesaurus, but sometimes
No.
I'm like, I've said the word like walks too many times. Like I need some
Like, you either need
sashaying, some
variety.
sauntering. You need a variety. You need some spice.
I do a thing where like I can think that there's a word
Yeah.
that I mean that is not the word that is coming to mind, but it's almost that word.
Yeah.
And that's when thesaurus.com is really handy
Yes.
for me, because I'm just like going through like lists of lists like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's
That's the
amazing
one I was
as-
trying to think of.
As writers, how often we forget words. Like, you
Words
would
is
think
hard.
Yeah, words is very hard. Words is hard. Hashtag. Is that how hashtags work? I just say that. Probably not. So process, going back to
Yes.
process, talking a little bit about that. I always find it fascinating because there's, as writers, I feel like we tend to codify how we do things, and then we often tell other writers how to do things based on how we do things. And, well, that's clearly how
but
you do things.
I need to just like point out that Chuck gives some of the best practical writing advice.
Well, thank you.
That like anytime people are just like, what's your advice for writers? And it's like, go listen to my friend Chuck Wendig.
Thank you.
He has several different books that you can read
I do.
that would also
I do.
make great gifts.
Wink, wink. Merry Christmas. Well, I often say that writing advice is bullshit, but bullshit fertilizes. So there's some value to it if there's value to it. In other words, it's useful to you or no one else. So what is your way in? What is your process? Do you write every day? Do you write in big fits and bursts, or do you kind of persnickety poke your way through it?
I'm a binge writer.
Binge writer.
And I think I'm a binge writer because I started writing seriously doing National Novel Writing Month.
Right. Right.
And before that, I was a theater major in college. I took playwriting. I wrote a lot of scenes. I didn't really write plays.
Sure.
And I would do that thing if I started to try to write prose, because it was something I would like toy with for a while. I would write a page and I'd hate it, so I'd stop writing, which is not the way to write. You need to write more pages and hate more of them, and continue until like eventually you have pages that you don't hate quite so much. And National Novel Writing Month, for anyone who doesn't know, it's an online-based challenge to write 50,000 words in 30 days. It normally takes place in November, but that's a lot of words and not a lot of days. And it was
on a month with a big holiday.
Yeah. I know Chris is sorry that he originally, Chris Beatty, who originated. Yeah. I've met him a couple times. He's told me he's an only child, and so he was always trying to get all his friends to do something. Let's all do this. Let's all do that. Like, let's all write a novel was not the one he thought was going to stay.
That's the one that stuck. Yeah.
But it has.
And now we're all doing it.
But it was perfect for me because I didn't have time to hate what I was writing because I had to write so much more of it.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get to those things. I'd say like I probably hated every word I wrote in the first several years.
Sure.
That I did National Novel Writing Month, but it was great for getting that practice of just getting words down on the page.
Yeah.
And then going back and having something to work with, because it's so much easier to work, even if you're going to change every word.
Yeah.
Like, it's easier than going from a blank page only. Like, it's easier to like have something there. It's just like there's probably like a good like pottery metaphor where you have to like at least have the pile of clay to like work from. You need like raw material that then you can shape into something. And that's sort of how I started. And so that's still kind of how I write now. I will write a lot and then I won't write at all.
Sure.
I'll do sort of like input mode and output mode, where I'll write a lot and then I'll think about it, but I won't actively write. I'll just like kind of let it sit in the back of my head, and I'll go and do other things and then come back to it, because I kind of need to get away from it and go back and get away from it, go back. But I am definitely still a binge person, and I do think like one of the like sort of like bad writing advice. I don't like that, like, write every day.
Write every day.
The
Yeah,
people
it's a
who
hard
get
one.
like, you have to do it. It's just like, no, you really
No,
don't.
you don't. Yeah. Turns out there's really nothing you have to do. Except eventually finish something.
Yeah, I
That's
was
all
going
you
to
have
say,
to do. Otherwise,
my writing advice, I've stolen both pieces of this. My favorite sort of like writing advice, I think I steal from Neil Gaiman, which is just keep writing and finish things.
Yeah.
Because I think the finish things is like very important.
Yeah. Well, I say most writers finish one novel every never. So.
But I also like to amend it with a thing that I think is usually attributed to Da Vinci, which is art is never finished, only abandoned.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can just keep tinkering with something forever and never be really finished with it. I think it's like, even when we got to the final stages of this book, it was like, I could have kept working on it.
Yeah.
But I felt okay letting it go.
That's good. That's a good
Like,
place
I
to
didn't
be.
immediately do that. No, give it back. It's
Do you
not
do
done.
do you do a lot of drafts? How many drafts? Yeah. I know
My
that.
editor's here. She's going to laugh. I do. I'd say we went through at least 4 full drafts. Again,
Okay.
like I said, like with like the back half, like completely different.
Yeah.
Like every time.
Interesting.
I'd say the first 150 pages stayed like pretty much the same the whole
Okay.
time, and like everything else.
So, including
changed.
plot, language, everything. Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
Oh,
changed
fantastic.
this will mean nothing to people who like haven't read it, and like, but someone different was the Owl King in every draft.
Oh, that's like Clue. That's some Clue business.
Yes.
You film
Oh yeah, it is
multiple
like the
endings.
multiple endings.
Yeah, it's multiple endings. That's
But it's like
exciting.
I do that sort of, have you heard the thing where like you're either like a gardener or an architect?
Oh, sure.
Where,
You're
like,
either
the writing
growing
thing-
and curating, or
Or you're
designing
planning and things.
planning, yeah.
And I think both of those like occupations sound like they know what they're doing. So
Yeah,
I'm
no.
like neither, but I like to say like I excavate.
Yeah.
Like I dig around in the story and see what I find. And I think part of it is something that I kind of developed from doing something like National Novel Writing Month, because I think you find different things at a 10,000 word mark and you find different things at a 30,000 word mark, and like you
almost
dig
like a depth,
like the
yeah.
more you're writing into it, you find different things. And I think a lot of my process is just digging into the story and finding the shiny bits that I want to use and pulling them back up. And then I think because of that, I'm used to throwing a lot of things away.
Sure. But no, that's interesting, because the digging down and the sort of underground component fits too with the narrative architecture of both the Starless Sea itself and the novel itself. Wow, that's
true.
You've done some stuff. You really
Yeah.
got a multi-layered thing.
Yeah, it is not a simple book.
No. So before we go to audience questions, one more thing. We talked about video games, okay? We talked about gin and cocktails. We could keep talking about that, to be clear. But what are some of your favorite books? It's a book about books in many ways. So
Ooh.
I know you you have an author
I know, is that a
shelf here,
secret?
right? No, I'm sorry. If it was,
Are
I
we allowed
spoiled
to
it.
tell? Okay, no, we
Don't
didn't say
tell
anything
anyone.
about me choosing favorite books
No,
that
I'm
might
sorry.
be on displays at some stores.
Some stores somewhere.
In the future, maybe. No one's going to know.
Yeah.
I really like a book called Wanderers that was written by this guy named Chuck Wendig.
I didn't beg for this. This is not a.
No,
But thank you.
Sorry, Chuck. It's a really good book.
Thank you.
I actually got it. They sent me because people send me like advanced copies of things, and I'm a slow reader and I don't have a lot of time to read. And I got this package in the mail last year, and like I could tell it was like this book, and I was just like, who is sending me this like giant thing? I'm
Yeah.
not
Yes.
I'm not gonna read whatever this is. And I
Yeah.
opened it as just like Chuck Wendig Wanderers. I was like, oh, I am gonna read this. And it happened to hit like I got it between drafts. I got it like, when I'd like handed in one draft of Starless,
Oh,
and
that
I
was timed
like
well.
had like a window that I actually had time to read.
Yay.
And I inhaled that book, and it reminded me of like I did this weird thing when I was like 11 where I like kind of wandered out of the children's section of the library and into the adult section, and there was this big interesting looking bottom shelf with these big fat books that said Stephen King. And I read a lot of them when I was like 11 and 12. No one should do that.
No,
It's
I
too,
did the same thing.
It's too early. I like to say I was reading Stephen King when I was 12 and Harry Potter when I was 21, which speaks volumes about my literary development. But Wanderers, like it felt like that sort of big, sprawling Stephen King-esque real world, but elevated and like that felt like these are all real people and these are all things that are happening in that way. That
if Starless Sea is counter programming, Wanderers is not.
But it's such a good book.
Thank you.
And it's one of those things where like it's sometimes funny, like I know people who live on my bookshelves now, like, and like had so many moments of like reading it being like, I can't believe my friend Chuck wrote this. Because I would forget it. Like that's how absorbed in it I got. And it's highly recommended. It's one of the best things I read this year. Or last year. See, this is the thing. Then I don't remember when things come out because I read that.
It's all blur.
My other favorite that I've read that's coming out in February is a book called The Unwilling by Kelly Braffett. Kelly usually writes these like dark, realistic kind of thrillery like things, and then this is her first fantasy, and it is what I wanted after I was mad about Game of Thrones. It's like sharp and feminist and like so she does so much world building in such a short amount of time. Even like 100 pages in, I felt like I knew this world.
Awesome.
And she does like really cool things where she takes that sort of like there's a castle and like it's sort of like a walled city kind of thing, but it also there's factories and there's like a really interesting like the court system that has all that sort of like Marie Antoinette-esque like political intrigue sort of like gossipy kind of stuff. It's like there's so many interesting flavors layered on it, and it comes out in February. It's called The Unwilling. I will not shut up about it, so it's going to be my thing. I'll wear the sandwich board with the cover on it.
Just throw the book at people.
Yes, I like to throw Wanderers at people too, but it's very heavy.
It's very heavy.
It's dangerous.
Yeah. You will kill somebody. Yeah, it's not good. Don't do that. Let's should we open it up?
Yeah.
The
should we do questions? I think there's people with microphones to assist with.
There's a
if anyone has questions, put your hand up and we will get a microphone to you.
Hello. I'm in the very lucky position of having read an advanced copy of your book. It's amazing. I'm also in the enviable position of being 48 hours into my first play of Dragon Age Inquisition. Yes. Which, if you've never played the game, means I'm like a fifth of the way through.
Yeah,
Great.
I have a playthrough that I logged like almost 200 hours in.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it, which leads me to asking you for some very practical advice on how do you like life and write and do things while Dragon Age Inquisition exists, because I can't do anything else.
I feel that feeling.
Cool.
I completely understand. I think you just need to like pace yourself and like do like, this sounds so dumb. It's like a video game. It's just like you need to do like I'm stopping at this time. Like I'm going to play until like 9 p.m. and then I'm going to stop.
I do that and then midnight happens, Erin.
I know, because there's like always something else to do. It's just like someone sends you off to like on another fetch quest and you're just like, oh, I have time to do that. It's just like, I'm like, oh, I should organize my inventory before I do anything else.
There's so much crafting to do, Erin. So much crafting.
Did you know you craft things in Silverite? It takes the class restriction off your armor.
Don't tell me this. I have to go to bed tonight at some point. Just take this away.
I'm sorry, but I'm happy for you because it's like having like, there's something about, we were talking about this the other day, there's something about a game like that it's almost like getting to live in like the world of a book like that, because you get to, I say this in the Starless Sea, because you get to live in it. Like you get to be actively involved and you get to spend so much time. I do think like video games right now are the best bang for your entertainment buck you can possibly get.
Yeah, and storytelling. There's so much storytelling potential in video games.
I think there's some of the most interesting storytelling I've seen in the past few years has been in video game. Like, because people are doing like really interesting things and you can do so much with it and you can kind of expand what a story is and what a narrative is. And like, I'm so excited for you. Yes,
or you can just be an angry goose. Has anyone played that game?
Also, Untitled Goose Game.
Untitled Goose Game.
Like and this is an Untitled Goose Game. Tell me if you agree with this. Is a very good, like, you haven't played video games. You don't have to know.
You have to know
anything
nothing except
like
honking and
like you literally
stealing people's stuff.
Yes, and I'm like
hating people.
I have this problem. Like now we're gonna get on a video game tangent. We're not gonna stop. Yeah. But I have this thing where do you watch Westworld?
Yeah.
They have this whole plot point in Westworld, but like no one goes white hat and like everyone goes black hat and everyone's terrible. I'm just like, I won't even pickpocket people in Skyrim. Yeah. I really feel like there'd be some people who are not doing this, but I very much enjoyed being a horrible goose.
Yeah. Something about those villagers.
Yes, I was just like, you jerks, it's my bell,
Yeah,
give
and,
it.
And I don't trust geese in real life. So I don't know what happened. There's some goose propaganda going on. They got in my head. Yeah.
This game is literally like, it's just like you're just an awful goose and you like mess with people's
An
stuff.
awful goose with a to-do list.
Yes, you're very organized.
You're very
just,
organized
like,
goose.
You have like this to-do list and you cross items
In
off it
cursive,
after
you
you
write
steal
it,
these
yeah.
things. Like lock the like groundskeeper out of the garden. Like mission accomplished.
All right.
Oh yeah, questions.
No,
We got distracted.
Right over here.
So I'm curious, how do you build a mythos around a place? Because the Starless Sea and like the Night Circus as places felt like these could be real locations in our world, like the way a lot of other places in fiction don't feel like they could be like a place. So how do you build like a mythology around your places?
Ooh, thank you. And I think part of it is, like you said, like I like real world fantasy. Like I like fantasy that kind of like rubs up against the everyday. So I think when I'm trying to build that fantastical world, I start with like what the actual, like if it was real, what would it be? I don't start very far out fantastical. I start kind of on that ground floor of like, this is like, if this was an actual circus that you could go to, like what would it entail? And then layer those fantastical elements on top of it. And with Starless Sea, it was sort of similar. It's just like, if like starting from a very real world perspective of like, you're an actual person in the actual world and dealing with actual world problems, and then something fantastical happens. So I think I start with real and then figure out how to like tweak it just a little bit and how to tiptoe it in to the fantastical. And especially with Starless Sea, I always wanted it to start very, very normal real world and slowly become more and more fantastical until it's full-blown fairy tale, like at one point. And I think doing it in like little increments, like and when you start with something that feels very realistic and feels therefore I think more accessible for the reader, you're not like dropping them right into something like that's a different world or a different thing. And starting it from the familiar allows you to like kind of make then the unfamiliar like feel more familiar. Words is hard again. But yeah, I think like that's the sort of fantasy I like, that like grounded in reality, and then it kind of tiptoes over into fantastical.
Now I want a Starless Sea video game, though, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Right?
that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
don't know.
missed where the microphones are.
Yeah, the microphones are in
They're
control.
moving.
We're taking turns on either
Oh,
side.
so we're that way.
I guess me. Hi.
Ooh.
So actually, I wanted to piggyback off of what you had started with. So about adulting and things and doing all the things. I guess really the more important thing is when it is midnight and you go, oh God, I have to go to bed. But then the voice in your head says, you haven't done enough things today. And you haven't done the things you want to do. How do you quiet that voice that tells you you haven't done enough?
Ooh. Oh.
CBD oil.
Good answer.
No, that's yeah, same, same, and it's also like I think it's hard, and it's still hard for me, like writing full time, like separating work time from like lifetime from video game time, and I think there's that pressure a little bit that like I feel like if I can be working, I should be working. And I need to tell myself to stop it a lot because I know I get to the point where like I'm not being productive because I'm just trying to push through, and I'd be better off if I just put the book away and went and played Dragon Age until I fall asleep. But it's hard, and not even kidding, the CBD oil is and ashwagandha is my other go-to. But I think it's like a daily sort of, I take each day like as it comes, kind of figuring out like if I feel like I made progress in any level of whether it was work progress or life progress or just self-care progress, I think I'm usually like I can just say, okay, I did good. Like sometimes I think just getting through the day is an accomplishment. So yeah. Oh, This got like heavy and thoughtful.
Yeah. Like I think sometimes just for me, it's like even if you write a little bit, if you do a little bit of that thing, like I have a kid, an 8-year-old, and it wasn't until I started to be like, well, no, of course you can't eat your dessert until you eat your dinner. And I was like, oh, I get it. I understand something about myself now. Okay, I should probably eat my dinner first before my dessert. Okay, good lesson, me.
We are hungry, aren't we?
We are hungry.
Hi. First of all, thank you both for having this panel. Big fan of your work specifically.
Thank you for coming.
So right now I'm actually trying to write a story, and I'm just wondering, like, how do you get that point of finishing a story? Because I keep rewriting the opening chapters over and over again, and I really don't want to get stuck in that pitfall of being in the shitty first draft and never finishing it.
I think that, like, everything's going to be individual. Like every story is going to have its own like progression, and it's going to be unique to you and how you write. But I think if you're getting hung up writing, like doing the same thing like over and over and over again with the opening, go do something else. Like go work on the middle or work on the end. I feel like I read a lot of books. Tell me if you think this, like you can feel that the beginning was like worked on a lot, and then somewhere like it loses steam in the last 50 pages. And those last 50 pages are just as important as the first 50 pages or the first 5 pages, depending on like how long it is. And I think like people get very focused on like grabbing reader attention and like all those things about the opening, but like the whole thing, like you can give like the same amount of weight to the whole, like looking at it as a whole instead of looking at it in like little pieces, but then also not getting overwhelmed by looking at it as a, I know there's no easy, like there's no like just do this. Though there is a guy named Chuck Wendig who gives excellent writing advice. I was gonna say, like, do you have a good one for this?
Yeah, I have an idea that, and this sounds like super bad advice, but bear with me. You need to care less about what you're
that's
doing.
Very good advice.
You need to take fewer fucks out of the fuck basket. You can't take all the fucks out, because then you're like, why am I doing this? My fuck basket is empty. Yep. This is dumb. But you need just some in there, but not enough so it's heavy. I mean...
So it's like give fewer fucks.
Give fewer fucks. Yes. Fewer fucks. Maintain a few. If you... any autonomous action, whether we're talking breathing or sleeping, become difficult if you think about them too much. I dare you to try that right now about, hey, what's breathing like? And you start like, I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out. It's not good. Sleeping is the same way. If you think about sleeping, you're not going to sleep. So with writing, there's really, so much value in kind of letting off the handlebars a little bit and letting the bike kind of go where it's going to go, because you're safe. You never have to get it right on the first go. You don't have to get it right on the 10th go. You have as many go-arounds on that book as you like, so you can just sort of barrel forward unburdened by the fuck basket.
That's very good advice.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Hi. Thank you, both of you, for being here. My question is twofold, but it's really quick. My first question is, Erin, I love your writing because it makes magic feel real and tangible to me. So the first part of my question is, what in your everyday life feels magical to you, or how do you create magic in your everyday life?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Ooh, it is a very good question. And I have a very silly answer because it's the everyday life. And the first thing I thought was my cat.
Vesper the cat. You should follow her on Instagram.
Yes, thank you for doing the Instagram plug. My entire book tour is just a ploy to get people to follow my cat on Instagram. I have the most adorable cat in the world. She is like a weird little magical creature. Her name is Vesper. You can follow her on Instagram. She is Lady Vesper the cat. I promise I will post more pictures of her, because I realize I've been like telling everyone to follow her on Instagram, and then I haven't posted any pictures because I've been on tour. I'm like, sorry. But I also, besides Vesper, who is a very magical creature, I live in the middle of the woods now. I live in, like, it looks like Narnia when I left because we had snow. And I think just like that sort of, you can look up and find magic anywhere. I'm sorry, this room looks magic. I love this lighting scheme. Like when I like to talk about like environment and like in creating mood and atmosphere in writing, one of the things I always think about is lighting, because I studied lighting design in college. And so I always like to describe how a room is lit. We were in this room earlier when the fluorescents were on, and it felt very different. And this like just that like having like the crowd and the lights and everybody here, it's like it makes the room magic. And I think you can see those little magical things in the everyday, like if you just like stop to look around.
Thank you. The second part of my question is perhaps less interesting, but as a writer and as a creator, what do you do when you feel stuck?
Oh, I go and do something else. I don't get like sort of like writer's block, and I think part of it is that way that sort of messy, non-linear way that I write. Like if I'm like working on something that's not coming together, I'll go work on a different part of the book. Like, and having the sort of layered story, like I could go and do something that literally had nothing to do with what I was writing. I could go write something else. And if I'm stuck on like everything, I'll literally just walk away and not write for a while, because I know that eventually I will get that, like something will come to mind if I just like stop. It's like that sort of thing where like you can only see something out of the corner of your eye once you stop trying to look at it. Like, so I think if I feel the need to like if I know it's not going the way I want and I feel like I have to walk away, I know it will come back to me. Like it never seems to take as long as I think like it would. Like I sometimes do like, oh, I'll never get it right. It's just like, no, like never is a long time. It like maybe I will probably feel better about this in like 36 hours.
Hi, this is for both Chuck and Erin. Of the characters that you've written, which over here.
This way.
Sorry.
I was gonna say.
Did you hear my question?
Say again.
For the both of you, of the characters that you've written, which is most like you?
Oh.
You go first.
Oh gosh, who is most like me? That's such an interesting question. In some ways, they're all like me because it's very difficult to write a character who's 0% you. I don't know that you can do that, but also it's weird. I don't know that any of them are really 100% me. I mean, Miriam is way too messed up. Miriam Black, who can see how people are going to die when she touches them, and Mr. Bones, the angry, huggable murder droid from Star Wars. I don't know. That's such an interesting question. I don't have a good answer for it because they're all kind of there. It's like a weird broken mirror. Every character, I always try to figure out who they are and how I can relate to them in an empathic sort of way, but then also how I can do something different with them than what I would expect, because that way hopefully I'm surprising people with those characters. So it's always such an interesting mix.
Yeah. I do the same thing where it's just like everybody. You kind of have to be everybody. But Zachary's me. Zachary's me on a lot of levels, and I think part of it is that I spend more time and more pages with Zachary than I have with any other character I've ever written. And he's his own character, and he's his own like has his own thing, but there are occasional points in Starless where I purposely thought, what would I do here if this was genuinely happening? Which is why you have moments where things start to get a little serious and a little too strange and a little too weird, and your reaction is, I'm going to go hide in my room with my cat.
Yeah.
As I think like I was like, what would I do here? And also having that sort of like, I'm having a magical adventure and I really need to take my contact lenses out.
Yeah. There's a lot of those little moments.
Yes.
No, that's good.
Because these are things I think about.
Yeah.
Like you get swept up in all these like extraordinary things. It's just like, but if I wear my contacts for more than like 8 hours, like they need to come out.
Yeah. What the hell, C.S. Lewis? Get on board with the reality train. I'll say in Wanderer, Shayna is probably the closest to me, just because she grew up on a farm, kind of like I did, and was sort of felt hidebound by that world and that property and that place and her family, but she has artistic aspirations, which I also had, and so she kind of gets out of it in her own strange way. I won't spoil anything there, but interesting.
We have time for just 2 more questions, unfortunately.
No
Make
pressure.
them good. Do it.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm one of the people who's also read The Starless Sea, and I'm not going to spoil this conversation, really, but a character in the book has strong opinions about Donna Tartt novels. And I'm wondering if you share their opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of opinions about books that are just my opinions about books. In Starless Sea that I give to various characters, and one of them is my Donna Tartt opinion on the Goldfinch, which is that I love The Secret History. The Secret History is one of my all-time favorite books, like of all time. That actually, like my My lovely Doubleday babies just gifted me an early holiday present of an advanced reading copy of The Secret History, which is
Near mint.
yes, it's so pretty. I was like petting it. I love that book so much. But yeah, it's one of those things where like I think you do have like authors that like you can love one book to little pieces, and you can have another book that every time you look at it, you say, I can't believe it won the Pulitzer. I know people who love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just.
Who are these people?
I know. I seriously know people whose taste I trust, who genuinely love it. But I really like that. Like you can have single books that have such like differing opinions and reactions to it. Like I feel like it's weird to expect any one book to like every reader will love. That's just nonsense. It's like you don't expect like everyone loves sushi. But there's books that you like, how can you not love this book? It's just because people love the sort of books that they love. I was talking with booksellers at a bookseller event earlier this year, and I won't say what book it was, but one of them was going on about how they couldn't stand it, and the other one was planning a tattoo related to it. And that sort of differing opinion is one of the things I love. We have one more?
Okay, last question. No pressure.
Hi. First, I want to thank you because I actually got into the circus because of the night circus. We are both fire spinners now.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
If you want to come play with us anytime, upstate New York. But my question is actually about endings. You mentioned earlier on that there were like 4 different drafts and different back halves of the book. And you were talking earlier about also how it was not a stressful book, but as soon as I see that there are like 50 pages left, I panic. But you have such great skill with the night circus also of writing such, like, without spoiling, like really satisfying endings or endings that feel good. Like, of course you don't want the story to end, but like personally as a reader, I felt really happy with where it was at. And were there, like, did you experience the same panic of like what was going to happen? Or when you had those like 4 or probably many more like alternate endings, did you know, like, or did you have like some conflict in terms of what was going to happen to the characters? Yeah, especially, I don't know. I really liked Mirabel's aside at the end.
Excellent. I think part of the problem for me is I never know where it's going to go, but I'm also very particular about I want to leave the story at the right place to leave the story. And I think I have a line in Starless something about this where like I like a story that feels like it's still going on somehow when you have left it as the reader, but it's still continuing on somewhere, and finding the right tone and the right amount of like strings to tie together and some maybe to leave like dangling just a little bit, and like what do you do and what do you leave and how much do you tie up at the end there. And part of what the interesting thing of the process of writing Starless Sea was I rewrote the ending so many times that the ending ended up being about endings. And it ended up being like, what is the end of a story? Does a story really end? And what is the shape of a story and what makes it story shaped? And one of the things that I always think about is that like when I remember being little and thinking that it was frustrating that life doesn't feel story shaped, because life has all the other extra bits in it that you would edit out, and that you don't have these moments that feel like that they have the shape of a story. So I wanted to kind of carve the shape of a story onto something that still felt like it was like real life, and it has some of the boring bits in there. Maybe we don't stay on them too long, but like it has an awareness of the story layers and the life layers and all of that, and then coming to a close. And I do like to think it doesn't really end. The same thing with the night circus. The night circus is like you've reached the end of this particular story, and the space is still there. But yeah, I think, like to go back to what I said earlier, I think that end is important. Like, I've read books that kind of like I love all the way through, and then there's something that feels a little off about where it leaves you, because I think it's almost more important than the opening is that last page of what you leave the reader with. And I think that's always going to be something I pay a lot of attention to, is just like, what's that last taste you get before you stop. You're very welcome. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Erin.